we covering everything. I'm talking in news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their stories should be heard. Yeah, every voice matters.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog on Friday. Yay, Friday. It is Friday for those of us who are in quarantine and
that's a better way to. That's how I want to go.
Don't even know what month it is.
Peacefully in my own hotel closet.
No, we know the year. You
that's
remember
fetish, right?
when we had the luxury of thinking like 2016 was the worst year?
I didn't even find out you were into that. Are you just jerking off in a turtleneck and you're like, I like where this is going. A little more fresh.
No, not happening. So for those of you tuning in this morning, good morning. I'm Kerri,
they have a 10-day wait
my
for the guns.
lovely
That's a
co-host
good rule.
is
A gun should never be an
Andy
impulse
from
buy.
Canada.
You should never be returning a gun like we made up. So. You know what's weird? They always bring up the founding fathers. Every gun debate,
on the corner of your screen, we have our own little PSA this morning because we care about our viewers and we want you to live.
It was a long time ago. That's how long ago it was. They thought a powdered wig was a good look, so that's my stance on guns. You could have a gun, but I think you should have to wear the wig.
I think that they're just messing with us now because the worst part was watching the briefing with President Trump.
At least then I can tell who's dangerous
and
from afar.
having his White House guy.
I'm trying to get in my apartment at 2 a.m. and I turn around and see a Ben Franklin looking motherfucker.
In a nicer way, saying the exact same thing. Like, oh yeah, this is. Don't listen to any of that. I think that they're doing a parody of the Onion at this point.
They always bring up the founding fathers. They never mention the fact these people had a life expectancy of the mid-30s, so it probably wasn't a big deal when they got shot. I would assume most funerals were like, look, you had 3 to 5 years left tops, so that's like getting shot now in your 80s, which would almost be kind of cool.
And this is
how would you rather
what
die? Connected to tubes for 3 months? Would you rather go out like a G?
Hey, and I spent.
I want to die in my 80s in a gang-related incident.
12, 14 hours.
I want my obituary to say comedian Sam Morril was shot dead today at the age of 87. His last words, thug life.
I'm trying to figure out.
As he emptied the clip.
Like, with this latest one, how are they going to
There's so much to be scared of, too, isn't there? Incels, there are new words you have to learn. Incels.
And it occurred to me, well, maybe
involuntary
it's not
celibates.
Trump
They don't get laid, but they become terrorists, and they look a lot like me. It's very upsetting.
But they see favorably.
That's a certain type of person, because I have married friends that don't get laid. They haven't made the jump to ISIS, but maybe they should. ISIS lacks that type of diversity. They don't have enough divorced men. Just a bunch of dudes. Death to the infidels, and one guy like, also Karen. I mean, we gotta kill Karen too, right? You ever read the botched terrorist missions? Those are my favorites, the ones who couldn't cut it. There were these guys around 9/11. They were getting too drunk at strip clubs in Florida. I love the fact that you can come to this country hating us and then you go to a few strip clubs and you're like, not that bad.
Yeah, you and I were talking about yesterday the Black
It turned out to be a
Widow,
false report, though, because they said they were going to strip clubs and
or,
dive bars and even college parties. I was like, oh man, it's such a bummer.
Killing
That's
her
where you want to be a
spouses
terrorist,
through
like a mixer.
green Jello and what was it?
They're like, we used to be Al
Some
Qaeda, now we're
chemicals.
Sigma Chi. So the objective is still virgins, but you know.
So
I think about it all the time. I think about, you know.
So it's almost a giant experiment, social experiment, in the Darwin Awards.
Oh, you know, that's got to be a bummer. You know what the first thing I say when I get on flights now is I say, what a lovely day it is to be alive. And I hope that positive energy trickles its way into the cockpit. And they're like, yeah, it is good.
at this point, because we know he himself did not expect to get elected, and it looked like a death march when he came out to accept that he actually won. If you can remember back to 2017, 16. Do you think now he's really he's trying to lose? He just wants to be done? Because here in this country, it doesn't matter what you do as president, we don't prosecute you after the fact. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right, because if you look at the way that our society has been since the very beginning, before we even became a country, I would say that. And then even when it comes to media, because on Wednesday we talked about clickbait media, and the measure of success, right? So it's not the integrity of the reporting or the quality of the reporting. It's how many views and how many people are sharing content and all of these things. But when you stop and look at the credibility of it, like, I keep going back to the measure of like CNN and Fox and fake news. But we habitually go back to those networks anyway. Even though we ourselves will say, I don't trust them for the reporting or anything like that. So it's an interesting, why do we do what we do? And just, if we stop to think about it for a second, does it make sense? So if you are a MAGA person tuning in, welcome. We appreciate all comers. And if you want to weigh in on the chat about why you are still a Trump supporter, especially for this election season, I mean, no judgment here, because I myself am still struggling with what am I going to do in November, because I got the lesser evil and the evil, but they're both evil. So, oh, I got a report that your audio is out. So, yeah. So, hold on. Everybody got to be able to hear what Andy says. No, don't stop talking. Hold on. All right, so let's see. Can't hear Andy at all. Oh, you know what I think it is? I think your audio was coming in through my speaker. So let's try this. Might get an echo. Hold on.
You've got your headphones on, so it might be okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll wait to see if someone indicates that they can hear me now.
Okay, let's check here. We've got Kay commenting. Let's see.
That's right. She's always full of comments.
And she'll appreciate that.
Right.
Oh, she said, there we go. Now you have audio. So, woo.
Okay, so you basically just, I'm going through your speakers, is that the idea, or?
I think so, yeah. I've got
right.
you on a secondary, so
Here,
that means
if it-
I can get
if it
rid of
helps, I'll just maybe move my
Okay.
microphone a little closer.
headphones.
Okay,
Okay, it's
All right.
fine now. Yay,
so
thank you, Kay.
take two.
Take two. All right, rewind on your rant there, Andy. Go ahead.
Oh, I just, like even trying to remember what I just said, because I wasn't even paying attention.
You weren't paying attention to yourself or to
No.
me.
I'm so full of shit, you know.
It's Friday. It's whatever. Don't
Yeah,
ask what's
sure.
in the coffee cup. May not be coffee today.
So here's the abbreviated version. Blah blah blah. Trump disinfected. Blah blah blah. Everybody's an idiot. We're caught up. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. So for everybody who's tuning in, we fixed the audio. Thank you so much for your help. And for anyone else who wants to jump in on the conversation, put it in the chat. We'll see it. Might not see it right away, but we will definitely see it. And we definitely want your participation, your input, your feedback. Be gentle with the criticism. It's still early. But also this morning we have a wonderful guest. Andy, I am not familiar with this particular guest, so if you could make an intro.
Well, our guest is a therapist from state of Minnesota, the great state of Minnesota. I have to remember to say that.
Minnesota.
Canadians don't say the great province of or whatever. But,
Right.
But yeah, and I worked with her before in different projects and stuff, and she's just a wonderful person and an ardent Bernie supporter. And so there was a lot, obviously, in the last 2 weeks, and we've talked about this, how a lot of Bernie people are kind of wandering aimlessly in the forest, not knowing how to proceed, based on their feelings about what was kind of sort of inevitable anyway, since we knew that things were kind of changing the way they were. So I thought that we could talk a little bit about that and maybe alleviate some people's fears. And there's our lovely guest now.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. We've never met, so very nice to meet you and welcome to the program this morning.
It's nice to meet you. I don't think I've ever met you before.
No.
So I thought that we would call this show Therapy for the Therapist.
Okay.
Okay? Because I know that your talents and skills have been called upon quite a bit in the last little while, as we all slowly slip into madness, stuck in our homes. And I wanted, well, first of all, why don't you introduce yourself, Sarah, and tell people what you do and how your vocation has changed in the current situation.
Okay, so my name is Sara Williams, and I actually work in Minnesota. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I actually work in an office. I own my own office here in Winstead, Minnesota, and I typically, like I said, work in an office, but because of the coronavirus now, I have started doing my own telehealth.
That's, how has that changed the way that you deal with people? Like, do you find that it's helped or that it's been a hindrance?
I think trying to be able to do things over the computer has been a bit of a challenge, only because for me and for my clients, it's been making sure that everybody has access to internet as well as a computer or a phone in order to do teletherapy, because it is more advantageous to have a camera as well as the audio and so forth. It's nice to be able to have the face-to-face contact, because we do rely so much on facial expression and body cues in therapy. But otherwise, it is a lot like doing face-to-face therapy or in-person therapy, as long as you have the camera. But the biggest thing was getting over the humps of trying to figure out the technical difficulties with camera and so forth.
Yeah, I would imagine that your first meeting with them is working out the technical bugs. Right?
Oh yes, that was, and still even sometimes you get knocked off. Sometimes you just get completely dropped, and you have to reconnect and so forth.
That's right, especially if you're dealing with some kind of mental distress, and all of a sudden your therapist disappears. That could be a little discerning. You know?
Yes, it is.
So how have you been dealing with people that, are you finding that people are talking more about just the current situation or that kind of thing?
I am helping a lot with the current situation. There seems to be a lot of anxiety surrounding the coronavirus. So I'm working a lot with people to try to help them to calm down or to relieve their anxiety in regards to the coronavirus, as well as helping them to just work through their own anxieties regarding financial difficulties as well, because so many of my clients have been laid off of their jobs as well.
Right, yeah.
And it's also them also not getting their unemployment checks at all. So they're not getting any unemployment. Many of them have checked on it and they're not getting unemployment as well.
We're finding that in the recent interviews that Dawn's done is that part of the candidates that we've been interviewing has been a major part has been calling people just to make sure that they're doing all right and they have enough food, and so it's just not the typical election cycle.
No, and that's right. And it's me even helping them with referrals, like where's your local food bank? So helping them find out some of these things, the places they can go in the local area to get help with certain things. So
now, this is I'm making an assumption here, but when things hopefully get back to some kind of normalcy, do you see yourself continuing to do the telehealth thing, or would you rather just exclusively go back to office visits?
Well, we were actually looking into doing telehealth because a lot of my clients, I work with a lot of adolescents as well as adults too. And so a lot of my clients don't want to leave me, like when they go to college and so forth. And some of them, if they're further away, they don't want to drive. So I was actually signing up for telehealth as this occurred. Having had this disaster, as I call it, kind of expedited things, because insurance companies, as we all know, make things much more difficult. And because of the coronavirus, it kind of expedited it and made it a lot easier to enter this realm. So
now, when you started doing the telehealth, did you find that you had enough jammy pants?
Yes, and how do you mean? So
well, typically when you're doing telehealth, that you're from the waist up is what it seems, right? So why change it unless you have to?
Well, it is funny, the last few days it's like I have been wearing shorts from the waist down, and everybody's like, so are you wearing jammy pants? I've had clients ask me that. I'm like, no, but I am wearing shorts. So
we just talked, Kerri and I, she shared a story with me about the judge that was doing a tele trial somewhere, where they were doing a video trial, and the two, it turns out that one of the lawyers wasn't wearing any pants and the other lawyer wasn't wearing a shirt.
Yes.
So they got ripped a new one by the justice system.
Oh, absolutely. No, I know. I'm like, sometimes one of my cats will sneak in my office and I shut the door usually. And so it's like, I hope I don't have to stand up during this session, because if I have to stand up, everybody's going to know,
Yeah, the trials that you have to go through, and the learning experience, the learning curve that you have to go through.
Yeah.
So the other part of this that I wanted to talk about today, because I know that there's been a lot of really hard feelings among Bernie supporters, and I don't think I'm telling tales when I say that you're a fairly ardent Bernie supporter.
I very much am.
And how people were were really kind of like lost, walking around aimlessly in the woods, not knowing how to proceed. And so I thought that if we talked about that in a more of a logical perspective, that might maybe give people an idea of why this has all occurred, right? And so if you're okay with that, we could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, all right. So I think that a lot of people are feeling abandoned, right, by Bernie Sanders. And I think that, and I called it wedding planning syndrome, because I remember when I got married in 1995, that it was just my wife and I who were planning the wedding. We didn't have any family around us, and we were basically doing all that. And I was an equal, as a guy. Apparently that's not the standard fare, but I had a lot to do with the planning. And when the wedding's done and that day is over, and then you're out and we went on honeymoon right away, you're sitting at the pool at whatever resort you're at going and saying, is this it? Is it all over now? Right? And so there's this buildup of people's enthusiasm, right? And people's understanding that this could happen. This is all going to maybe end up putting Senator Sanders in the White House, and we'll get everything we want, and it's all great and wonderful. And then when you get the legs cut out from underneath you, it's demoralizing, right? It's paradigm shifting almost in your own mind. On top of the fact that we're trying to deal with a pandemic too, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's a lot of the issues. And I always kind of wanted to just reach out to people and say, look, I don't think that it was ever Bernie's intention that he was necessarily going to be successful as this endeavor, or even measure success by the end game of him living in the White House. And I think that that's really an important thing. And Kerri and I have had the opportunity to talk to a number of different people that are on a lot of different levels in the grassroots movement, and how things are proceeding, and how Fadil Kaboub, MMT economist, the associate professor of economics in Denison, who's a good friend, who has taken a number of progressive candidates under his wing and taught them MMT and showed them how the progressive agenda is possible, right? And so when you look at the body of work, per se, underneath what Bernie's been able to accomplish, you understand what the revolution and what the whole concept of the progressive revolution means, right? And I've said this a number of times, that it's the first two words of Bernie's platform is not me, right? And you have to keep that in mind, right?
And that's been my key focus on all of this, is with Bernie, is not to focus so much on him and the end result being him in the White House, only because I suspected that there was going to be some game playing and some movement by the DNC that they would try not to ensure that he wouldn't get in the White House. And so I assumed that the end result would not be that he would end up there. Not to be, totally negative about it. It was more of the fact that this was going to be a revolution, though, that there were going to be more people woken up and more people more aware of what was going on in the United States, and more people capable of joining our movement, so that they were able to see what was happening in the United States, but also around the world in regards to austerity and neoliberalism and so forth.
Right, and I think that we're seeing now, because of the pandemic and this government spending that's had to occur to keep the market afloat and to keep small businesses, and unfortunately not so much human beings, but everybody else afloat, and how that money's just flowed continuously without anybody asking how it's being paid.
That's right. Now we're capable of seeing that the government can just spend, and that we can afford Medicare for all. We can afford to pay off college debt. We can afford to pay off all of those things if we wanted to. Right. It's just more of the fact that the government has to want to do those things for the people rather than put it into other areas, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Kerri, you raised your hand like you had a question.
I do. We actually had a question come in from the web, some of our viewers, so thank you for that question. And this ties in line, Sarah, with the whole in making reasonable and prudent investments on a federal level, which is the basis of MMT. And it's showing that we have a degradation in our society amongst many levels and cross sections, not just healthcare and other things. So one of these statistics that I don't think we had considered but has risen dramatically is the incidence of domestic violence. Mm-hmm. So this question pertains to what advice or suggestions could you give to somebody who, even couples now who haven't typically had problems are getting agitated in the stress of everything else. But for those couples who have struggled with domestic abuse or people who are on the verge of making the decision to actually leave, what advice do we give to them now when it feels like we're locked in?
Well, I'm very much in favor of, if there is that separation possibility. Right now, don't make any big decisions because we are under a lot of undue stress. So don't be in that position that, okay, yes, now is the time we're getting a divorce. Because right now we are under a lot of undue stress. So I would suggest, if you can have that separation, take a separation from each other, but then revisit later when this stressful situation is done and over with, because right now is not the time to make a big decision like that. But I do suggest, if you do have the capability or the possibility to search out counseling, I would try that, because typically it's the way we communicate that is the biggest issue. We get into this communication cycle that's very, very unhealthy, and we have to try to communicate in a better way. The negative patterns we get into can be very, very detrimental to the relationship. So.
So, okay, but we're talking about conflict. So obviously if somebody is in physical danger, that's something else. You're specifically talking about diffusing arguments like, in my house, it's the toothpaste. Something stupid like the toothpaste could potentially, under this kind of stress, spiral out of control. And then, of course, the number one reason couples fight is over money. And right now, if you're struggling, small business owners are not getting the relief that they need. And just because, a friend of mine's a teacher and is still at 50 to 70% of salary.
Yes.
Right. So all of these things are stressors, but just want to make the distinction between physical safety and just normal agitation.
And if there is not, if the person does not feel safe in their house, I do recommend any way that they can to get out of the home for right now. That is probably the most important thing, is if somebody isn't safe in their home, they need to leave. Any way that they can, any possibility. I know some domestic abuse shelters are actually open right now. Some of them are not. So it really depends on the shelter. And I know in bigger cities, some of them are open. Usually in the smaller cities, they're not. But some shelters have now started to open up specific places where there are homes or apartments that are reserved for people who are actually in a domestic abuse situation, that are actually sitting empty, that the shelter keeps, so that if it's a family, they can actually go and stay in a home or an apartment. And it's kept completely secret. So when the family moves out of the domestic abuse situation, they can go actually stay in a confidential home.
Oh. Okay.
I think a lot of the issues that we're facing right now is that our society's really changed just the way we deal with one another. Like, for an example, my daughter lives here at home because she goes to college close to us, so she's been able to stay with us. But when you're allowed to leave the house, you see your family a lot less. I mean, she would text me from her room to ask me a question, right?
Yes. Yeah, my kids do the same thing. Yep.
So we've almost moved our society away from personal contact, right, with social media and that, and now we're forced back into it. Mm-hmm. So it's that learning curve again that we're get back into, because now I've got to see you and talk to you face to face on a daily basis. I'm not used to that.
And I think that's a positive. I think that's such a positive thing, and it is a learning curve, because I think too there is that possibility for arguing. There's that possibility for misinterpretation now too, because people are so used to communicating through text that tones of voices now are misinterpreted. And so it's really understanding then too, what are we saying to each other and how we are saying it, and being careful in the way we talk to each other, watching our body language, watching our tone, so forth, things like that.
It's also been very good for me to find out where I am in the hierarchy of my home.
Yes.
So I've got, as far as I can understand, it starts with my wife and then my daughter, and then I think it's the older of the two dogs. And
so you're somewhere below them, okay.
And then the younger dog. So I'm not last, right?
Well, that's a positive. You're working your way up a little bit. So.
Well, and I was thinking about going out and maybe getting some fish, right? Okay. Because then that would just be below me more.
Absolutely, right? That's wonderful.
So, Sarah, let's talk a little bit about how do we diffuse it, right? Because if I didn't have the tools going into this, I still don't have these tools. So what do I do?
For communication?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's more or less watching the way we talk to each other, but also not interrupting each other. And so one of the skills I do in the therapy office, because that's usually one of the biggest things, is we can't talk to each other because we're always interrupting each other. So when somebody has a thought, that's one of the biggest problems, is they just automatically interrupt. They don't let the person finish what they're saying. So it's watching our tone, watching the way we're talking to the other person, but it's also then letting the person finish what they're saying. So what I typically do when I have couples that are in a high amount of tension or altercation states in the therapy room is I give them a ball. And I say, okay, while she's holding the ball, you cannot speak. And I say, if you have anything to say, you can write it on this notepad and you can take notes, so that while she's talking, if you want to maybe interject, you need to write it on a piece of paper. When she hands the ball, then it's her turn and she cannot speak. She has to write it on a piece of paper. If she wants to interject, then she has to write it down. That way then it gives everybody the opportunity to say what they need to say, because so often that's where our frustration comes from, is that we're not able to say what we want to say, and then our tension levels tend to go up more and more and more. And so that's usually where it comes from, but also making I statements rather than you statements. You statements tend to say, I'm blaming you. This is all your fault, whereas if we say, well, I feel like this, it's not so much putting it on the other person. It's saying this is how I'm feeling, and then the other person then needs to validate. I hear that you're feeling this way, but my intention is not to make you feel this way. But it's also then giving the person that validation that they feel that, okay, yes, I understand that you're feeling this way, but here, let me tell you, I'm not trying to make you feel this way, but this is why I did this.
And there's lots of different techniques that you could employ. If you're talking to someone and you can tell that they're upset or under a lot of stress because of the situation. And I remember having the union that I belonged to when I was working. They had a training facility, and you could take some really great courses, and one was conflict resolution, and how you frame a conflict when you're trying to diffuse a situation is a lot of the times the key to that diffusion. And the example of that was and this was mostly in the workplace, but if you had an employer who was angry at their employee because they were late a lot, right? And that you were trying to resolve this conflict. When you asked the employer why they were upset, and they said, well, the guy's been late 18 times, instead of using the negative, you turn it into a positive. So your next statement to that person is, so it seems to me that punctuality is important to you.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely. And I say that a lot to people too, as I say, so often we want to correct our partner, so we're always focusing on the things that they're doing wrong. But when they're doing something right, we don't often say something like, gosh, thank you so much for doing all the laundry. I really appreciate that. That was a big help to me because I needed all my clothes washed for next week. So we just overlook that and we don't say thank you. But when they do something wrong, we're like, you didn't do the dishes? You know, it's just like, then I hear about it too. So your point about the positivity and framing something in a positive sense is very important.
Absolutely.
So Andy's Canadian, so this, you guys, it's inherent. You're just a positive people, happy, positive people. So
well, it's because we have health care.
Well,
yes, Canadians have health care. It makes a huge difference. It really does.
Yeah.
And you know what? And just to show that difference, and I know that there's so many things that we don't know about COVID-19, and I'm not going to jump to conclusions or make assumptions about anything, but quite honestly, right now, our numbers here in Canada are showing that, obviously we know that there's an issue with long-term care facilities, right? That they're like a breeding ground for the virus, and just the way they're set up, and the residents that live there, and that's the battleground. That's where we're going to have the hardest fight, is trying to save our seniors and people with disabilities that have to live in these facilities, right? But
Absolutely.
The rest of the population seems that, like in Canada, we've gotten the upper hand on this, right? They're seeing less and less people coming to the hospital. But it's because our government's, actually jumped in and started implementing things when they were supposed to, right? And part and parcel of that is people not being afraid to talk to healthcare professionals and go to the hospital if they need to, and worry about if they can afford it.
And they can pay for it. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and that's really scary.
And the thing here is that is that's a huge factor in all of this, is that people even before this weren't going to the hospital when they needed to. So it's just that mindset too here, is that I can't go to the hospital, I can't go to my clinic, I can't go in, and I even see that in mental health. It's I can't go in and talk to somebody.
Absolutely. I have another question from the web, and I'm going to add my take on it. So it's a two-part question, and let me say this is completely unfair. So have fun with it.
Okay.
So we're stepping back now from a national perspective, and their question was about what truly feels like gaslighting from not just the administration itself, but Democratic leadership too. So we're being subjected to all this gaslighting. So the question was, what do you expect or suspect the long-term effect is going to be on the American psyche? And then my completely unfair piece of it is all of these protesters who were in Minnesota and Michigan and out there frustrated about, you're taking my freedoms. Let's say one of those hypothetically came to you with that frustration. As a therapist, how do you diffuse somebody who feels so compelled to risk their own safety and the safety of others because they feel like their freedoms are being taken away, which in and of itself, to me, looks like these people have been gaslit so thoroughly that it's prompted them to go out. So two-part question, what do you say?
Well, I think, well, let's start with the first part. So how was the first part? I'm going to go.
With the gaslighting that's going on from leadership, the question came in about the administration, the Trump administration, but I'm adding a tandem on for leadership in general.
So I do believe there's going to be some long-term impacts from the gaslighting from administration, just because of the fact that I think there's a lot of hard feelings. We were told that not to worry. We were told, everything's going to be fine. It warms up. All of this is going to go away. So many different things. And then all of a sudden, it's like, how many people have died in New York City? How many people have been impacted in Louisiana and Detroit? And all of this. So I think this was a huge impact for a lot of people, because how many, 40,000 people have died in the United States so far. So this is quite a few people. Mm-hmm. And so I think this has instilled an incredible amount of fear in people. So there is the possibility just of secondhand PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. And so people are going to have this level of fear or trauma related to this. So, it is being able to talk to whomever you can at this point about your feelings and your fears, as well as your anxiety related to this. Even if it's not a therapist, talking it out and being able to not feel stupid for having fears, or for just being able to vent your anxieties and frustrations regarding this. But I also think that that we are going through such a difficult time, because we are constantly being told then too that we have to get the market up and running again, but they're not. So everybody's in this position of going, okay, we have to go back to work. We have to go back to work. And so I would validate the people who are saying, I have to get back to work. So they're actually angry with the government and saying we have to go back to work. But they're not understanding that actually the government could support us. The government could help us. The government could provide us with more, like a lot of the other governments around the world. And so that we wouldn't be in these dire straits situations to have to make this choice to put our lives on the line in order to go back to work. So, that's my thought on all of this, is that they're not seeing the big picture as well, is that they could actually see the big picture and say, no, we actually need more support during this time. We need health care, we need rent control, or we need stops put in place when it comes to our mortgages. We need more help monthly to be able to pay our bills. These are just things that the government could do to help us, instead of bailing out maybe corporations and other places that they seem to be sticking the money. All of us, it's just like they're angry at the wrong people. And so, the only way to help those people who are in this frame of mind is to really validate them, but to get them thinking about it and saying, well, if you couldn't go back to work, what are some other ways that could provide you some support? And get them to really be thinking about the problem. And really take them out of that blame cycle, because then when they start thinking of other ways, they start going into blame, and they want to blame other people, like immigrants. They want to blame, other people. They start pointing fingers, and so we have to also take them out of that blame cycle. What are other ways that we can maybe get support during this time? And then we have to really start helping them see that there is ways to get help, but the problem is systemic.
Absolutely. It's going to end up that the neoliberal governments have spent the last 50 years doing the gaslighting that this has occurred, right? And they don't want to give that narrative up, because it took them so long to get to this point where they basically control everything, including the news media, right? So you can't rely on, the Democrats or the Republicans or the Orange Blossom in main share. It's going to end up being that people in your own neighborhoods are going to have to help one another. Right?
Yes.
We can't rely on the people running the place. We're going to have to help each other, and that's the way that's the way charities have had to take care of each other. We don't get me started on that, but personally, I would say that when I'm feeling down and a little bit depressed, I just think about Nancy Pelosi's ice cream.
It makes me feel a lot better, yes.
Oh, yes.
What are they calling her? What is her nickname now? it's really kind of funny.
I want to see that.
Antoinette or something like that.
Yes, like the meat ice cream.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, Andy, you bring up a good point. Sarah, self-care, right? How do we unplug, step back? I mean, we still want to be engaged. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We love that you're here. Please come back. But self-care, what do we do? Well, what's the right balance? How do we even begin? What does that look like?
Well, and a lot of people go straight to like, okay, let's take a bath. Let's make sure we're going for walks. Let's make sure we're doing the fun stuff, doing the things we enjoy. But self-care does go beyond that. And that's really learning how to look inside and relax and being able to say, am I truly relaxed? Because I think so often we have so many things going on in our head. So we've got our brain going here and our brain going here, and it's going 20 different directions. So we really do have to focus on where is our head going to during this time, because we can say, oh, I took a bath, but I don't feel relaxed. Well, maybe it's because you weren't relaxing your brain. It's also emotional self-care. So it's being able to say, did I really take the time to really relax my brain? So it's really focusing on emotional self-care, mental self-care, as well as physical self-care. We're actually probably getting a lot of opportunity right now maybe to relax physically, but are we relaxing emotionally? And so that's important too, is being able to vent and get the things that are bothering us off our mind as well. So it is doing the things we really enjoy. And so that's one of the things I've been really coaching a lot of my clients with is, what brings you joy? What in your life brings you joy? Right now you might have some spare time on your hands. It's really important to go back to those things that bring you joy. And I mean those things that when you look back at your childhood, and those times when you were so happy and you remember laughing exuberantly, what were those things? And what are those things that you do as an adult that really kind of relax you and make you happy and bring you joy? Try to find those things and try to do those things more often, because as adults we become so serious-minded and we become so responsible that oftentimes we don't take time for those things in our lives anymore.
And when you do figure it out and you go to the liquor store, make sure you wear your mask.
Yes, exactly.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I've actually thought that it's a really good idea that we, get some exercise while we're at home, because, so I actually moved my beer fridge to the other end of the house. Right?
I'm not gonna lie.
And you don't yell at your kids to go get you a beer. No.
Exactly.
Remember the hierarchy?
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's right. So that maybe the young dog might
If
have
I
it.
could get, yeah, she would drink it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you are below that dog then too.
Yeah, probably. Just delusional.
Yeah.
Right? Holding up the floor.
Just believing that you're, maybe a little bit above.
It's the way I cope, Sarah. Okay.
Okay, we can let you believe you're
That's right. When I was in high school, number 1 and number 2 was nothing you ever wanted to do. Right?
Okay.
That's awesome. So, Sarah, I don't mean to put you on the spot yet again, but
Okay, that's okay.
if somebody thinks that they maybe need a little more help and wants to talk to a therapist, can they get in touch with you, or are you taking new clients?
Yes, I do. I take new clients. So yes, they can get in touch with me. And there's also places online that you can do strictly online sessions too. So you can look up sessions where you can go online. But otherwise, if you go to Psychology Today, you can find therapists in your area if you want to do therapists in your area. But otherwise, yes, I usually take new clients. And I think, what I caution everybody with is to find a therapist that they feel comfortable with, a therapist that they feel comfortable talking to, a therapist that feels like there isn't judgment in any way, shape, or form, and that they that there is that level of rapport that is natural.
Excellent, great advice. And if you don't mind, then we'll take the link to your professional site and we'll put that in our chat and all of the features here. So, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Any other questions that we have? We've had great audience participation this morning, so thank you everybody who was listening. Oh, we just got another comment about injecting disinfectant to cure COVID. No, and if you look at our screen, we've got our little PSA in the corner: don't drink bleach.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, no, or eat the Jell-O.
I think that a really good idea, and this would really make the daily Trumpian press briefings more interesting, is if the president demonstrated what he knew.
Yes, let's make that a thing.
Absolutely, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I want to see him blow sunshine out the you know what.
Well, and keep in mind, people, that mental health and physical health is so closely related. Obviously, our mental health is going to tell us not to imbibe disinfectants. Do not do that, please. But in all seriousness, though, our mental health and our physical health is very, very closely related. So if we're not doing well emotionally, our immune system is going to be impacted. So we do have to make sure that we're keeping our mental health in check.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think that's very, very true. That one part of your body can have an effect on a lot of the other different parts, right?
That's right.
For example, have you ever seen something with your eyes that's made you sick to your stomach? Right?
That's right.
I mean, it's
Absolutely.
interconnected physically, right? You've got,
Yes.
if you're not feeling, if you're not in a good psychological place, then that can affect you physically. And we have to be really careful, because it's not like, you could just go out, right? You've got to plan your trips. You've got to, wear the proper protective equipment.
Yes.
It's not like it used to be.
And I've had clients who are in such a severe state of stress that they actually put themselves into seizures. So, I mean, that is, that does happen. That does honestly happen, where people have to really watch their emotional health and make sure that they're in a good place.
Right. We've actually, my wife and I came to a decision that once this has come back to a little bit of normalcy and she's able to move back in the house, we're going to host a big party, and it's going to be called Hug-a-Palooza.
Yes, that is wonderful. That's a great idea. And also, I tell clients all the time, I say, something to do, especially when you're under a lot of stress, is to set a goal. Even if it's not a big goal, but that's a great goal. You're setting a goal and you're looking forward to something, and if you always have something to look forward to, it gives us like something to really work toward, and it gives us something happy to feel like, okay, yay, I got something coming up, And so that would be a great goal. Even if it's a vacation, it doesn't have to be a big vacation. It could be somewhere in your state that you're going to go visit for 2 days,
Right.
But it's just an exciting thing to look forward to doing,
Exactly. And I've tried to tell all my friends, I said, the first time I see you after this, if I do give you a hug, it's probably going to be awkward after the first 10 seconds. But just wait it out. Eventually I'll release you.
Yeah, eventually I'll let you go, but then the next time I hug you, it's not going to feel so weird.
If I ever get another chance.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Wow.
The world, it's just this. I think that's the biggest thing that's been hard on me, is just, the not being able to have the physical contact with people. And for example, a good friend of mine popped over. She bless her heart, went to brave the lineups at Costco, and she ended up spending 3 hours in there, not just because of the lineups, but because she said, well, I'm going to go there because I have to. Does anybody need anything? Well, yeah, well, she ended up, it's a good thing she had a truck. So she ended up, by the time she was done, I think she went out like just after the supper hour, and she didn't get home until after 10 o'clock at night. But that was dropping everything off, and, oh my God, thank you so much for doing that for me. See you later. Oh, yeah.
Because well, I'm sure it's like everybody wanted something, and then going into Costco, it's like you can't get out of there because it's busy, you know?
Yes. Oh, I went to one place that I've had to go a number of times is because Deb's in the trailer and it's been so cold. You know, trailers aren't meant for cold weather, so we're going through a lot of propane. Right? So I've been taking the propane tanks to this one gas station that hasn't been busy, getting them refilled. Right? And I went into the store to pay, and I know it's kind of like a smaller grocery store. So, well, maybe I'll walk around, see if they have anything that I'm maybe running low on and stuff. And I'm walking. Well, this woman walked in the store. She didn't have a mask on. She was in some really big hurry, and she's walking, like going down the aisles and walking around and stuff. And she kept looking like she was coming right at me, and so I would turn around and go the other way. And I felt like I was in a giant Pac-Man game, right? Like, waka. And you're just she was a ghost and chasing me around. I'd have to go the other way, and it was surreal.
Trying to stay out of her way because you don't want her to breathe on you.
No. Exactly. And I'm lucky because being a maintenance guy, electrician, and doing a lot of stuff like that, I have a box of N95 masks. Well, I have a few left. I've gave most of them to the hospital.
Yeah.
But so I wear that when I go out because I know that's the best protection for me. And so I'm not so much worried about that. But you know, you still want. What you doing? Where'd you go? You know, because I'm not the tallest person. It's not like I can see over the aisles.
Yeah, it's like, is she coming back again?
Right. We live in fear of neighbors, so amazing. But all right, Andy, we have reached the top of the hour, so thank you, Miss Sara. This was so incredibly helpful and such a great wealth of information, and I hope that the people that are watching our show, either now or when they wake up at noon, will take your good advice. And if you feel like you need someone extra to talk to, somebody special, impartial, reach out to Sara, and we will post her information, or all the great resources that she talked about here today, because we are going to get through this. We're going to get through it together, and changing the mindset into something positive, looking at something positive, like Andy's adventure at the little grocery store, while stressful, now is downright funny. So
that's right.
Oh, and we can laugh about it now. Yeah.
And yes, and anybody can find me on Facebook if they have any questions too. You can private message me, and I can try to help any way I can. Can't guarantee I can get back to you right away, but if I don't get back to you right away, message me again. So it's okay. So
perfect.
Thank you so much, Sara.
Absolutely.
I so much appreciate your advice, and you're one of my most favorite people in the whole world. I just adore you, and I think you're a great giving person.
The feeling's mutual.
Okay.
So.
All right, so we got to wrap this up because I ran out of coffee 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. We're wrapping it up now. So just a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. Andy and I will be back bright and early on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then on Tuesday, we will have episode 2 of Digital Liberation Front. This evening, though, we have a very special interview with Shahid Buttar. I think, is that this evening or tomorrow? Well, we've got 2.
I think that's Saturday night. Tonight we have the lovely and talented Lauren Ashcraft. Absolutely. And then to all of our brothers and sisters who have started observance of Ramadan Mubarak to you, and good luck. We're with you. We support you, especially during this particular time. I just came off Lent, so yeah, good luck to you, and hope that it goes well for you this month. But that's all we got, so we're out of here, and we'll see you again bright and early Monday morning. Thank you. Please come back and visit us.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to be on your show, you guys. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. This that new media company covering everything. Talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting